favourable slopes, but it's payback time obviously in the second half.
Yes, this is mile 11 for the women, Alemu. If she's feeling good, I don't know whether she's got another gear. She looks more like a one-pace runner, kind of, that kind of heel and toe. But she's looking pretty strong, pretty even. And there's one thing, sorry Jeff, I was just thinking that the Ethiopians get big support wherever they race. It seems there's a fan club. It's not just Haile Gebrselassie, but every Ethiopian runner. There seems to be a community in every city going.
I think it's a nice feature of their sort of own brand of patriotism and nationalism that the expats do turn out by the busload, especially in the UK, but we've seen it in indoor meetings in Boston where the American Ethiopian contingent were there, and they add always to the spectacle, to the excitement and to the support. They travel very well, I think, the Ethiopian supporters.
Brief glimpse there, which did give us an update on the women's race. Alemu of Ethiopia leads. It's Dereba of Kenya, former Boston champion, who was in second. She's gone ahead of Yevtich. Now then, Jackson Kipongok.
The 43-year-old in the commentary booth. Salute Jackson Kipongok. Man of the 5th decade. Having his moment.
Yes. Now, what do you think Kipongok's role is in here? He's got Robert Cheruiyot, considerably younger, actually 25, the champion. Alongside him, those two are ahead, well, not by much, of that big pack here. Eli Rono, we pick him out because of his height and that cap he's wearing, but I'm just looking through there. Rogers Rock wearing a lighter gear, the man who did the double, a fantastic double of Boston and New York in 2002. You have to look at Salazar, Billy Rogers, Boston Billy, and Joseph Chebet of Kenya. Was the latest to do that very high-class double of marathoning. Natick and the Town Green is where they are, on mile 7.
Just to make it clear as we look at that head-on shot, the European interests are still represented in there with the Pole, Gadges, he's still in shot, and Ouadi of France, and also I can see the Australian at the back of that pack, the man that has to shoot a 2:12 if he's to qualify or be considered for the Australian Olympic team. It's last gasp chances from around the world, and Boston realistically is a final opportunity for pretty much all of the serious marathon running nations to impress their Olympic selectors.
Well, looking around in that pack, were they sort of veering from one side of the road to the other? Do you think they were moving a little too much? I mean, surely the straightest line is the idea.
Do you know what happens in elite packs at some point is people get mesmerised. Sometimes it's drink stations. So here clearly is some sort of drink station going on over to the right-hand side of the shot. But sometimes there's all sorts of spoof little bursts put in, and people get mesmerised. We've seen it in big races where you almost get a conga weaving down either side of the lead road, and people aren't thinking. They're just thinking, I'm not going to lead, I'm following that man in front. Never mind where the blue line is.
It's quite something that of the runners of this class. So there it's almost like formation dancing with Robert Cheruiyot, the champion. He goes to one side. Well, okay, drinks tables on both sides. But yes, you would think there's quite a lot of effort being expended there to weave from one side of the road to the other. They've done a sort of crisscross. And now they're going to reform. Well,
no, but often this is where the breaks occur because it does break up the rhythm, but you can't afford to miss a drink station on a day like today.
Alemu and Dereba has the Ethiopian in their sights, and Yevtich of Serbia and Montenegro. Maybe we'd better understand that by saying Yugoslavia, but you know what I mean, is in third. Big gap. I think we can just see coming as Alemu goes through mile 11. So there's a rough split of 101. Or maybe just outside 101, 61.10 maybe for mile 11. Sorry, we don't have exact splits, but that's for the women. I could just see from those dips in the road that behind the third placer Yevtich, there looked like there was a few running figures, but you just couldn't make out how many. But that's setting the first three. They approach Wellesley. That's where the girls of Wellesley come out and freak to the heavens.
It's like an international hockey match with a crowd of schoolgirls. It's a very blue-stocking college, and it's a very high-powered school. But they shriek as if they're at a Take That concert. It's quite a nice feature. I think all of the runners will appreciate it, but it might just take them aback slightly as they approach the college.
Alemu showing neat technique in taking water. That's an art in itself, isn't it?
It is. She's very smooth. I think the Ethiopians in all their movements have a grace and an elegance, and don't have the clumsiness of certain other nationalities. But I guess even if you're a 224 operator as she is, even if you know what it's like to finish third in Boston, the one person you don't want to see in your rear view mirror at this point is De Ruyber, because De Ruyber really does know this course like the back of her hand. She excels in all sorts of conditions, and at the moment that gap is far from decisive. It's almost being controlled from behind by De Ruyber.
Catherine De Ruyber, twice a winner in Olympic year 2000, and then the next year as well of this great race. Jeftich still there in sight.
I always think she looks like Grace Jones, De Ruyber. She has that, the wrap round shades, the bearing,
right? Yes. Very upright style, isn't she? Impassive, as you pointed out, and she was even impassive, I think, when Paula Radcliffe was smashing everybody into the ground.
She's quite a spiritual person, isn't she? When she gives interviews, she makes a lot of religious references, and that's clearly important to her. But it adds to that sort of unflustered bearing that she seems to have. I think it suits her well in an event like the marathon. She's not made much impact at the distances below, but the 26 miles does suit her bearing and her temperament, I think.
Now then, back with the men, and running wide. I just wonder what Robert Chariot, the defending champion, is on the right. Then Jackson Kipongok, the 43-year-old, as Jeff is keen to point out.
Using his head, using his racecraft, running the shortest line down the middle, not getting the camber on either side of the road. No point getting old if you don't get smart.
And I would never say that my colleague doesn't have both of those attributes. And now they join up again, that big pack strung across the road. How often we've seen this in Boston Marathon, those classic scenes of the big cap.
7 miles just passed. I think it's the nose.
Well, being more lucky to say 7,
yeah, it's 7.
7 miles. That's slightly misleading. The caption in the bottom of your right hand of the screens. They're now into mile 8, but went through 7 miles in just outside around 35 minutes. Well, now Kiagora, I'm misreading that. Could well be that I've misread that, but 2 men certainly out in front, and again that lead pack goes and gets some more goodies to keep them fortified.
Sponges at the back of that line would have perhaps been the most appropriate thing at that point. They had a drink station for water to drink barely a mile previously. The old grab technique which you were referring to, there is a way of doing it, but it does assume that the person handing you the cup or the sponge holds it on top of an open palm. If they hold it like a crane, you almost get into an arm wrestling match sometimes, and it's there's an art in dispensing water and sponges as well as taking it on the move.
Now then, to revise things, if that is Jackson Kipongok 5:06 alongside him. Confirmation if that's Stephen Kiagora. Kiagora, one of the 3 athletes, Timothy Cherigat, Kiagora and Kipkemboi, Laban Kipkemboi, who are coached by Dieter Hogan, the German coach who advised Uta Pippig so successfully to triumphs in the 90s.
Now, for those of you that haven't watched wheelchair racing at this pace, Ernst van Dijk obviously bidding for a 4th consecutive title. Just look in particular at the narrowness of that front wheel. It's almost like a razor blade for aerodynamics, and look how the back wheels are shaped to fit his torso, but also curved inwards, leaning inwards, just for maximum aerodynamic effect. And the other thing that interested me in the press pack for the wheelchair athletes is they explain how all of them come to be in a wheelchair. And obviously some have suffered wasting conditions and polio and things like that. Others have. There's one that lost his use of his legs in an explosion. Makes a big difference to the power, the circulation of the body, the centre of gravity, and that kind of thing, as to how many of these Paralympic athletes come to be in a wheelchair. I've never read any research on it, but the use of your legs and whether you have circulation in them, whether you've suffered an amputation, makes a very big difference, I think, to how you can race at this sort of level.
Yeah, I spoke to Ernst van Dijk at last year's Berlin Marathon, where he didn't have one of his best races. He said he's more suited, in fact, because Berlin's so flat, he's more suited to this kind of Boston course where it's up and down. His is a very, well, poignant yet heartening story. He was born with not fully formed legs, and rather than losing his legs in an accident, and his parents were told, well, in effect, to give him away for adoption or to put him in a home, and they refused, and brought him up, got a college education, and until the last year or so he was managing at the University of Stellenbosch, just outside Cape Town, their sports centre. But because of his success in racing, especially in North America, he was able to give that job up, get sponsorship, and he's based, I think, sort of 50-50 between South Africa and in the States, where he goes around and races, and being in a chair, he can do more marathons and indeed long distance races than those who are runners.
It's a bit like triathlon. Yeah, he's only an hour and a half racing each time, isn't he? So it's actually less distribution of effort.
It's very, well, indeed, all those stories are very moving stories. Elfinesha Lemu, where she's been all the way through this women's race of Boston. Out in front, she's got the world champion Catherine Dereba of Kenya, chasing the Ethiopian with Jeftic of Yugoslavia behind her. Ernst van Dijk in the chair race. He's going for a fourth consecutive win. That would equal the record of the Swiss Franz Nietlischbach, who's also in this race. And Van Dijk really at his best on this Boston course with the ups and downs. And he'll come off those Newton Hills and go hell for leather for the finish.
You can see the pace that he generates on the back wheels causes the front wheel to bounce. It's a very lightweight titanium alloy machine, and he's very powerfully built in the upper body. Not the usual sort of strength distribution that you might expect in a runner's torso, obviously, because that's his engine. But you can see the front wheel just sort of bouncing away with every push that he puts on the back.
Ernst van Dijk, this is really getting to the dramatic moments for him in the heart of Boston. And Ernst van Dijk is going to come home and make his Boston glory. The fourth successive win is on the cards for the South African. 4 wins for Ernst van Dijk, and this is the course where he is at his best, powering along that number 1 so fittingly on his chair, because he's beaten the best that his rivals could offer. And Ernst van Dijk coming home to be the first champion of Boston 2004, and that's it. He knows he's got it. Ernst van Dijk of South Africa coming home for a 4th consecutive win in Boston. He equals the record of the Swiss Franz Nietlischbach, and he is the Boston men's wheelchair champion for 2004. It's Ernst van Dijk of South Africa. Well, clear for Van Dijk. It's now going to be a question of how big the margin is, but that's a triumph of his planning. He was saying when he competed in Berlin last September that really his goal is about Boston, and how much he's worked for it. And Van Dijk's first reaction, I think, is going to be one of many on this day, with the temperatures, well, in the mid-20s centigrade. They're all going to find it tough out there.
Well, he spoke about the pressure and the expectation on him for this race, and you can see he's really pushed himself very hard, calling for water as soon as he crossed the line, still gasping. You can see the chest heaving, got a little bit anaerobic there towards the end as he made the drive for the line. If he'd looked back, I think he would have seen it's a comfortable margin. Boston is a bit naughty in never tracking back once the winners cross the line. We stay with him for anthems and that kind of thing. Sometimes it can be disconcerting when there's a race been going on behind, but this really was all about the one man today. Ernst van Dijk, 4 in a row. They love their repeat wins, and they are going to have it tough. He's absolutely right.
Very interesting comments from Ernst van Dijk, who knows his sport all round, and that's a very perceptive remark. They're going to have a tough time. I think they are indeed, because the men are currently on schedule for something outside 2 hours 10. Men's champion, and that is Robert Cheruiyot, the men's champion of a year ago, that is, wearing number 1 on his vest, the Kenyan.
There's the Congo. Look, he's marking where he wants Rogers Rock to run, and Rogers Rock grinning away as having none of it. He's Mr. Lackadaisical, isn't he, Rogers Rock? He always looks, body language looks a little bit disinterested, never seems to be a particularly keen leader. But you can see they're swaying across from either side of the road, and this is what we were talking about earlier. Follow my leader. Nobody wants to lead except number 1 reluctantly, so he's going to step aside. They're going to follow him because they don't want to take up the running Rogers Rock finally does draw alongside.
Chariot. It was a strange old race last year because Vincent Kipsos, who's not running in this race, the Kenyan, went off very fast, then got caught, and then went ahead again to build up, a lead of just a few seconds. But then at 35 kilometres, how often that happens in a marathon, the deciding moment was a little way after that. I think it was decisive in the men's race in London the day before. But 35k, Robert Chariot, the big man wearing the all red, number 1, went away last year to win. Meantime, the slightly smaller figure, he's no midget by any means, wearing number 3, is Rogers Rock, champion of 2 years ago. Just behind Timothy Cherigat was 4, and Martin Lell, the New York winner of last autumn, is also in there. They're shifting around, there's a lot of manoeuvring going on there again. My goodness,
this is the drink station. Here's the drink station, though. That's the divide. Now, when they rejoin, the man at the back there on the left may well find that he's given a little bit of ground. It's so often almost an unnatural break that they take at drink stations, and packs that were nice and cohesive leading into them lose their rhythm, and they often shed 1 or 2 runners.
Cherigat, one of the trio, with Kipling Boy and Stephen Kilgore. Dieter Hogan, I mentioned a little bit earlier, the German coach, well, in fact, he divides his time between the States, Boulder, Colorado, and Germany. Dieter Hogan, who guided Uta Pippich to a hat-trick of Boston wins on the women's side in the 90s, and still writing and coaching today.
Kip Kemboy on the left was going to share his drink of water with his teammate, who actually has dropped back about 10 metres and now finds himself in no man's land off the back of that lead group. He's holding on to his drinks bottle for a little bit longer. The trick really to safely taking on board water is to take it in your mouth for a few strides. Don't swallow and gulp all in one movement, because that way you take down air, you get stitch and discomfort. It's best kept in the mouth for just a couple of strides and taken down smoothly rather than in one long swig. And I would say, if we're giving marks for drinks etiquette and protocol, the man that's still holding the yellow bottle there, now just discarded it at the back, probably has thought about it and worked on it a little bit more.
Well, Kip Kemboy, full marks to Dieter Hogan then, because well, at least you give him full marks, because I was reading and translating something from Dieter Hogan, about 10 pages for a website on hydration, Hydration as it was in German, in which Dieter Hogan said what you said, just word for word, in terms of drinking. Hold it, especially if water is at all cool or chilled, hold it in your mouth and then swallow just for a few seconds. And so, well done to Jeff White.
Well, great minds. Top man, Dieter.
Yes.
And he's got back on terms as well, so it hasn't cost him that gap. Just for a little while there, he was 2 or 3 strides off the back, and now they've reformed, and he can take a ride. Pretty smart running by that guy.
Number 16. Just at the back, Robert Chabarora, also from Kenya. Well, we're looking around there and saying Kenya, Kenya, Kenya.
The selections, the Olympic selections have been made, have they not?
Paul Tergat, the world record holder, although he pulled out of London with a calf problem, developed about a month or so ago. Now, I mean, I don't know how serious that is, but the news out of the camp of Tergat and Dr. Gabriela Rosa, his advisor, seems to be that it's not too serious. Eric Wainaina, Olympic silver medalist, and Sammy Correa, the man who was second, by only a second, to Paul Tergat in Berlin last September, sort of running as a pacemaker, but forced Tergat all the way to the line. Now, Correa was second in London the day before to Evans Ruto. They had that spill at 35k. They slipped by the Tower Hotel, didn't they? I mean, second in London Marathon is still a pretty fine result. I mean, you're sport for choice. I mean, I don't know. Unless there's an injury, I wouldn't see them bringing Ruto in instead of anybody. Through mile 10 for the men, but they're still outside 2 hours 10 pace. But the first champion already decided. Ernst van Dijk of South Africa, 4 wins in succession. For the man in the chair, equals the record.
Congratulations on what you achieved out there.
Larry Rawson.
Was it your goal to get away from everybody in the first couple of miles?
I knew the only shot I had at this race was to get away as soon as I could. So I went, as soon as the truck left us, I went as hard as I could. I got a gap they came back a little bit, which only pushed me harder, just faster.
Why did you feel it was so important? Were you afraid of the kicker of Joël Jeannot?
I knew it would take a course record to win him, and he got the course record as well. I got the world record, so I knew that's what it would take to win this race today.
Did you have any bad moments out there?
Oh no, they were all great. I kept on checking.
Apologies for all the colours of the spectrum. We just lost that Ernst van Dijk interview, and we're going to be going to a break, but hope to be back with Boston Marathon, and here's Ernst van Dijk again talking to Larry Rawson.
Happens with 4 hours of training 7 days a week, right?
That's true, all the hard work. I can just say to all my friends and all my family in South Africa, thank you for all the support, and this was one for South Africa.
We congratulate.
Thank you.
Well, one for South Africa, and the Africans out in front.
But not that one.
We are not with the US State Department, I hasten to add. We're going to a break. Back with you shortly. Well, they've gone through halfway, and I'm just going to say Alemu out in front, but actually, and Jeff, you were making the point that De Rijber is, well, the mistress of the tactics here, and although she's in second, Alemu led them through halfway. We're not getting exact splits, but it was just outside 1 hour 16, so certainly you're not going to be thinking of any course records, world best or anything. It's a slow time in prospect because of the hot conditions, but De Rijber is making Alemu work, and you can just see on Alemu's face that the effort that's going in, but she's hanging in there, isn't she?
Well, every time you look at it, you just get the sense that De Rijber is controlling this race from second place. There's not a lot of looking back from Alemu. She'll be able to hear the footfall, she'll be able to hear the crowd cheering, and she can see just glimpses of De Rijber's shadow right behind her. And she has the sort of demeanour of somebody tracking. Alemu has the look of one that's just ever so slightly hunted here. And De Rijber looks back there as they go through this very smart neighbourhood just before they start to reach the foothills of Newton, I guess, at this point.
Well, the Newton Hills, Heartbreak Hill, it's a series of 3, and just looking at our course map, yes, they're starting to climb from about 16. Hey, Matt, right on cue, thank you very much. That's what we want to know. Boston College. And then the heartbreak begins. It's been so much a part of Boston history. Ellis, Tarzan Brown from the 1930s on Heartbreak Hill. The great names, John A. Kelly, John J. Kelly, champions from the 30s and 50s.
That's great. Have you seen how they've managed to get a sprinkler out of that regular sort of fire hydrant there? I think the runners will welcome that at every opportunity through the race. No regulations, I think, on sprinklers. I think you can have them as frequently as you like in a race. It's just a matter of comfort and where you can get the water supply going and the pressure.
Alemu. De Rijber just a stride or two behind her. The movement going on in the men's race. Out in front in the all red is the defending champion Robert Chariot of Kenya. Rogers Rop, winner 2 years ago, and former New York champion, just alongside him. Then there's, well, in total we've got 6 Kenyans in there. Robert Chebaror is also there, just shifting around. The pack's gradually coming down. I suppose they kicked anything in to really get away from anybody, but it all seems coming down to this chess game, isn't it?
Look how they're stride for stride. That's often how you see the Kenyans run. They match strides. They so often train as squads and groups, and they go into training camps together. And when they hit a really good rhythm, it's a fantastic sight actually, because they're so free running and rangy, all of them.
Just taking you through from the right of picture, it's Stephen Chariot, the champion. Then Martin Lill, the world half marathon champion, the man who won New York. Rogers Rop, and then Timothy Cherigat and Robert Chebaror. That's the kind of front rank. But I say front rank, and there's 4 men behind them, and they're just mixing and matching. I think you're so right, that feature of Kenyan running, and I think I have to say Ethiopian running as well, but that pack thing, which used to be so much a feature of, say, European training, British Harrier training, it still goes on, but that club aspect of you all go out, and I think psychologically you get used, don't you, to having good days, bad days in training, and it just builds up mental strength. Although they're at your level, that you're used to running with and against people.
The danger of training all on your own is that when you find yourself in company at full speed, you're not relaxed. You're in unfamiliar territory and you feel under pressure, tense up, and it's not a familiar feeling. And yet most races at every level on the track and on the roads are running pack formation until the relatively closing stages.
Course of Boston undulating, we've made that point before, but this also gives you a good idea, because it's not just about the Newton Hills from mile 16 onwards, but it just goes up and down just gradually. Mind you, would you say that some runners are suited to that? I'm thinking back to the 80s, say Robert Di Castella running 207, and there's a big man about 6 foot
with tree trunk thighs.
Yeah, and maybe his strength took him through.
Well, and the other thing I was hearing firsthand about somebody that was at that run of Di Castella's was that it was a very, very strong side wind that day, and it was affecting quite a number of the more spindly runners, and Di Castella, with his strength and his power, just blasted straight through it, flattened the hills and ignored the side wind. If you look at these guys, they're relatively slender-legged. There's none of them that physiologically you would say are particularly well suited to pounding the course, but you only have to look at their CVs to know that they've got the pace and the rhythm to do it.
And the men, that group of 8 men, the Kenyans, will be getting their uplift from Wellesley College pretty soon. Well, 15 miles is, well, that's what they're on course to. They're not yet there yet. Approaching halfway. And just that look behind there from Timothy Cherrygat, a small figure in the white vest, just to see where people were. There's still quite a lot of shifting of position, isn't there? Like Rogers Ropp looking around, and Martin Lell now on the extreme right of picture.
Well, they moved left, as you can see, because it didn't actually give them the best advantage on the bend, but it did give them shade for about 300 yards back there through that wooded section. A little bit more shade here as they approach the 12-mile point as well.
Saying on neat movers, I'm just looking down, just if you look at their calves, you made the point about the stride and the kind of the equal rhythm, the synchronicity of their stride.
Yeah.
Another thing I noticed, I think especially about Kenyans, and we can get into all sorts of things here about whether it's genes, race, whatever, but so many of the elite Kenyan runners, I noticed it particularly with the men, have long, regardless of how tall or short they are, have long, very slim calf muscles.
Yes, they're not. I guess the musculature is quite different. I'm trying to think of an East African runner that is a more squat, powerfully built runner, and I'm struggling really. I think some of the Moroccans are a more powerful physique, but the classic East African look is wiry, low single percent body fat, 4 or 5% body fat, and sinewy.
Yeah. And yet, you can say, I mean, this is still talking about the men's side, you can see some, say, European men who look almost unnaturally thin, whereas I don't see any of the Kenyans. Like sometimes people, when they retire, if they stop running completely, they gain some weight because they're just not training. But you look at all these men, and others, plenty of others of size, like from the London winner, Evans Ruto and Sammy Carrera, etc., and they don't look as if they're on a forced diet. They're eating enough. It's just something there, and you can do a PhD, a doctorate, to work out what. Now, developments in the women's race. Diane Roy from Canada. I'm just trying to check on our backup details, whether Roy is in the lead, because we did have reports earlier at 25 kilometers. Sandra Graf was leading just by a second ahead of Edith Hunkler of Switzerland and the American Cherry Blowett. So we're just trying to work out with various aides from the course whether Diane Roy is the new leader in the women's chair. We've already had a men's champion, and that for the 4th year running, equaling the record, is Ernst van Dijk of South Africa. Diane Roy, this is her Boston debut. We'll catch up with her in the women's chair race shortly. But still, Alemu and De Reyber. It's not quite stride for stride. It's De Reyber letting Alemu just be in front slightly.
Well, it's also one of the great rivalries, isn't it? Ethiopia against Kenya. Ethiopia really stole the march over their old rivals at the World Cross Country Championships. In fact, there was something of an inquiry into what had happened to Kenyan distance running after the March World Cross Country Championships in Brussels. But obviously, a great day for Kenya in London yesterday. But they'll probably share drinks bottles, but I wouldn't have thought they'd be chatting. They've probably not got the common language to do so unless it is English. And it's a matter of national pride as to who comes out top in this duel, isn't it?
Both looking pretty good, I must say. Alemu before the race was kind of playing down her own achievements. She's won big city marathons. Alemu, 6th in the World Championships last year, but she was saying, well, I don't really feel I'm that much of a top runner. She's run 2:24, which is very respectable. Now, approaching halfway in the men's race, well, 63, that's a faster time than I would have expected given the conditions. I mean, from the women's, we're looking at a pretty slow time, I mean, the high 220s. So the men, that lead group, which is around 8, are going at a fair lick.
Well, I guess you'd say probably on the topography of the course that they've had probably all the downhill advantages they're going to get now. So any sort of speed that they were going to wring out of these conditions in the course, they've probably had the plus, and now it's a question of how they hold together for the minus.
Dan Roy of Canada. Now, is this going to be a Canadian following up the South African success in the men's chairs race? And Diane Roy is clear. The closing stages of Boston for her, and she's produced a surprise. Certainly just past halfway, it was news of Sandra Graf leading from the Swiss Edith Hunkler and Sherry Blatt, but Roy has overturned them. And Diane Roy coming home, accelerating those last few meters into the finish on Boylston Street in Boston. And this will be a win too on her debut in the city. What a fine way to make your debut in Boston. Now, not quite sure how many what the gap is for Roy over the second placer, but certainly clear. Look at that camera angle. Diane Roy coming through, and Roy of Canada just inside 1 hour 40. Diane Roy takes the women's title in Boston. Now that's a lot faster than the previous year. Well, we had it captioned, I have to apologise there, we had it captioned as Diane Roy, and then it was the woman who was third at just past the halfway mark, Sherry Blowett from the USA. Blowett, who was runner-up last year, but she's smashed her Boston best. She was in 1:54 last year, and she's 14 minutes and more faster. Catching up with the elites, men's and women's, and De Reba and Alemu both taking water. Temperatures in the high 20s, and that man's pack as they go through halfway. Looking at that time, 65 minutes or so for halfway, so it's not going to be records in Boston, but it's building up to a dramatic finish. Our women's lead, and De Reba of Kenya, the world champion, for once now ahead of Alemu, the Ethiopian, in terms of times, in terms of performances, then De Reba has an advantage of some 6 minutes over Alemu. But on a day when the temperature gauge is shooting up, that may not matter too much, may not be that much of a difference, but you'd think that De Reba has the whip hand here, that she's the one who's dictating things.
And her demeanour hasn't changed at all, has it? Alemu, just if anything, looking slightly more tense, slightly less comfortable of the two. They're over heartbreak, I think, now, aren't they? And they're onto the downside of that descent, so a different set of muscles coming into play, different type of racing action required. I could see this one going a long, long way into the race, this duel. I don't think there's anybody looking in particular discomfort. We've seen in Boston before, sometimes it can be like an elastic being cut when people do finally hit the wall or run out of gas. But
mind you, at 19 miles, they're just going through 19 miles, they then have another climb, which in a sense is the biggest climb of all, so up to 20, 21 and 22, and then after that 22 miles, then they sweep down into the heart of Boston. So it's a course where you're getting pounded, those quadriceps, those upper thighs are getting bashed
There's the mile marker. Look at that on the right-hand side curb. There's barbecues, there's brunches being taken. It's a national holiday in Massachusetts, Patriots Day, and it really just adds to the sort of pageant of the whole running of this event. It's 108 years old. It's way older than any other major marathon. It precedes most of them by more than half a century. But people of Boston really love this day, and on conditions like this, great for watching, a bit tough for running.
Yeah. And the history of Boston is also, as they're amongst these Newton Hills, of nations taking it in turn to dominate. We talk about the Africans now, but in previous Bostons, going back into the 50s, just after the Second World War, on the men's side, well, it was only men then, of course, it was the Finns and the Japanese coming through. And then, mid-70s, you had Bill Rogers leading that renaissance of American running, alongside, of course, the Olympic win in '72 of Frank Shorter. And then that's when the Africans started coming in the late 80s.
Yeah.
But it was the period when Boston, the profile waned, didn't it? Because they were one of the last big marathons to say, well, we'll pay prize money.
I was privy to the dilemma on that. I mean, they love their tradition and they love their sort of history, and there was a spell of a few years where plunging into paying money to athletes looked grubby. It looked like it was a sort of shamateurism era, and I think Boston sort of dithered, and it had a couple of very, very lean years. I can remember Jeff Smith of Great Britain winning it in a very, very slow time one year.
20 years ago.
Yeah, 2:21 or 2:22, and at that point I think the BAA just said, look, let's get with the developments in world athletics and start paying some appearance money, and it's come back through the Hancock organisation to level terms, and it is the Africans' turn. I wonder how many people know Ndereba by name. She's won on a number of occasions here. She is as about a prolific a runner as we've seen this century in Boston on the female side, but it's not like Greta Weitz in New York, is it, where there were banners out for her and almost like her own fan club. I think you perhaps have to work a little harder to get your rite of passage in Boston.
Certainly, Ndereba does a lot of running and racing based part of the year in Pennsylvania. So in the American road racing scene, she's well known, but I think, as with so many of the sports in the US, as they would be described as amateur sports, so they're not, of course, but the domination, and certainly through television, of American football, the NFL, and basketball, and the NBA, and NHL ice hockey, as such that other sports, in terms of profile, well, Ndereba, I'm sure these days, Carl Lewis, etc., Marion Jones, Tim Montgomery, could walk down most city streets and not only be left in peace by autograph hunters, that people would not know at all who they were. So that's that's part of profile for the athletics in general, which in some countries does struggle.
Don't get the sense that Ndereba is particularly forcing the issue here, is she? She's just almost taking her turn. Alemu, looking at the way she keeps switching and swapping from shoulder to shoulder, is perhaps the more reluctant follower here. They were almost better when Alemu was leading, and Ndereba, for both of them, was tracking her.
Little check on the watch from Ndereba. It's certainly looking back to Paris when she won the world title in August last year. That was, if any championship win can be comfortable, that was a pretty comfortable win. I mean, she was the form athlete, the time so much in advance of anybody else's, because Paula Radcliffe, etc. She didn't have any rivals of equal level, really. Looking at the race today, she might think, well, if I hang back and then make a move later on, no one's going to have the kind of skills and the ability to go with me. That may be how it's working out. But interesting, in the men's race on the side, I can see Rogers Rock still in there, Robert Chariot, and we're catching up with the men, and it's getting interesting. That rhythm is still pretty good, isn't it?
It's going to be a slow time in the men's race, though, isn't it? It's often we associate a large pack with a more shared effort and more of a sort of tram effect or locomotive effect as they work together. But it's actually the two together that are forcing a more credible women's time, whereas this group of I don't know if that was an official drink station. I don't think it was, actually. You have to be careful on things like that.
We've been talking a lot about the Kenyans, we both have, but to give him credit, wearing number 7, the middle of that group, Hailu Neguse of Ethiopia. He's got Stephen Kilgore alongside him, left of picture. number 1, Robert Cheruiyot, the champion. Martin Lell also wearing all red. So lots of Kenyans, but it's like 7 Kenyans and 1 Ethiopian. Now Gusé, 208 man. Well, that win came in Hofu in Korea. So 208. It's a pretty good time, but maybe this is his time. You know, there comes to those kind of moments of ascendancy, don't they, in careers, where you come through if you've got that ability and you can forget what you've done before.
A little bit of a changing of the guard in Ethiopia in particular at the moment. At the 2 extremes, you've got Kenenisa Bikila, of barely 21 years of age, has already won 3 double World Cross Countries, to the extent that they're changing the programme next year back to a single men's World Cross Country title. And at the top end, Haile Gebrselassie, who I think most neutrals would be willing to win his 3rd consecutive Olympic title in Athens this year, but you suspect he's on borrowed time. And somewhere in between the two is a chance for a few new names to rise to the top.
Yes, it's interesting, that aspect of appetite. I think Gebrselassie is still a wonderful athlete, but you get the feeling that it's not that he's training with any less application, but because in a way he's maturing. I think he and Paul Turgut, for example, they're people who've come up from very hard backgrounds, but you get a sense they're very rounded people as well. And he's got business interests, and he's got interest in Ethiopia and the people, his compatriots as well. So that he's just got, and I think it's very heartening to see, he's got other things in his life. And after that Achilles problem, he's getting a bronze in the 10,000, and he's still way up there, but may not quite have it when it comes to a sharp finish.
Well, you'd never write him off, but he certainly has other interests, and it's just miles on the clock, like a car sometimes as well, isn't it?
Getting some miles on the clock too, the leading duo in the women's race. Dereba on the left, Alemu of Ethiopia alongside the Kenyan, and Alemu's arms sort of driving up, showing there amongst these hills now. It's a sort of circuit which pulls them up and down. Mile 20, they still haven't got out of it. It's going to be from, well, mile 21 onwards that they really will be hurtling down towards the finish on Boylston Street.
Incidentally, just reflecting back on that unofficial drink station, that in this day and age, somebody hands you a drink of something.
Dodgy, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the protocol for drinks is that the elite athletes will all have prepared theirs the night before in sealed containers. They'll have been put in sealed boxes and taken under escort and never let out somebody's sight. And then if you take an open cup of water from somebody, well-intentioned though it might be, it's...
Yes, I agree. In the days when now athletes still have to be responsible for what's in their bodies, I think it's often used as the excuse of, well, it was in a supplement. I'm not just talking about track and field athletics, or something that I took unwittingly, but what can you do? You've got to be responsible. Boston College, Heartbreak Hill approaches for the men too. There's an element here, I think, especially for the men's race. How many times distance runners, it's usually on a Sunday morning, people go out and it's the long Sunday run, and it's the pull, and you're working on the series of hills, and it develops into kind of picking up the pace, and you're not quite racing, but it's about mentally toughening yourself as well as the body, and it's learning, as we were saying before, about that harrier mentality of moving around in the pack, and now it's the lead changes, and Kiagora is up there, but it's that getting used to shifting around and coming back from not feeling so good, feeling better.
Yeah, and I think hill work for runners of many standards is approached in a variety of ways. I can't remember if it was DK Silver. I know the great Sam Bell from Indiana University never used to set his athletes hill repeat sessions. They never used to have to run up and down the same hill, but he would often send them over undulating long runs with instructions to attack the hills, so that when they it came across them in a race situation, that spirit of attacking the hill would be with them rather than fearing it or backing off.
Well, I think it's I can't understand sometimes when I hear people even do like at sort of very lower levels, or the moderate level, avoiding hills. I think hills are what make you strong, and these men, these Kenyans and Ethiopians, par excellence in the world of distance running today, they are the strong men. That group looking good. Kiagora, Rogers Rock wearing 3, the champion Robert Cheruiyot in the all red. They're all in there. They're mixing up the pace as they go through mile 16 in Boston. Not a sensationally fast time, but when you think, I've raced against Takahashi and I've beaten her.
From home territory.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. That Alemu, for all, she kind of, I did feel that in the build-up to Boston, she was playing down. Go through 21 miles, taking that split, so just inside, well, along 155, 155.50 odd.
Yeah.
That Alemu must think, I may say I don't think I'm got a chance, but I've beaten one of the best.
She has, although I believe the Japanese Federation haven't picked Takahashi for the Olympics, perhaps in reaction to that.
Well, I just get the feeling that Takahashi may not be, she's had some injury problems, and whether she's passed over the peak of the hill and is just coming down the other side, I'm not sure. It's, you look at a Radcliffe is unique, okay, but there'll come a time when there's someone else who is ahead of her.
Yeah. And
that's true for any of us, isn't it?
Yeah, you just got to hope that your peak of the hill, the peak year, coincides with a major championship, and you can get some of your goals achieved, some of your dreams realised at the time when your form is at its very, very best. And it's not for long for even these prolific athletes.
2 Kenyans away. Timothy Cherigat. Oh, and this is going to be interesting. Martin Lell has been dropped back into 3rd place. It's Rogers Ropp and Timothy Cherigat.
Ropp looks over his shoulder more than any other elite athlete I've ever seen. He just seems to be such a reluctant leader. You get that nodding diffidence, almost shyness, and then looking back the whole time, and you think, well, if you don't want to lead, then move to the side. He seems almost a bashful kind of runner. In fact, he gave far too much of himself away in New York, because he came into the Central Park final turn stride for stride with the eventual winner, and then started dropping his arms, giving away that he had stitch. And for me, racecraft involves disguising those sort of things, because it just rejuvenated the opposition completely. An unofficial drink.
And Ropp's taken it again. It's amazing. Well, it is unofficial, isn't it? Because there's a woman in the kind of shorts and cut-off top.
She's just being helpful, and he's taking it, but
I don't understand. Well, I mean, neither party seems to understand, neither Rogers Ropp nor the woman on the side.
We should just explain here, I mean, the rule is that you're only supposed to take drinks at official stations. You're not meant to have helpers or aides passing to you. But unfortunately, in the current climate, you don't know what's in a drink that's being given to you by a American housewife. I mean, I'm sure it's just water, but...
And Dieter Baumann, the German, former European champion, he would say, and I have a hunch, I may sound like Sherlock Holmes here, kind of Mycroft Holmes, Jeff, but I have a hunch from my contacts in Germany, and I do have contacts in Germany, that there may be some more to come out of the stories of Baumann. Baumann, who served his suspension, tested positive, always protested his innocence. Okay, so many do. And he came back to compete and ran in the European Championships a couple of years ago. And he claimed that his toothpaste was, as you said, spiked, that somebody got at it. There were all sorts of stories coming out in Germany, because Baumann was very critical of the drug-taking regime in East Germany, the GDR, and there were stories, never quite substantiated, that there were people in East German, well, from the old East German athletics, who were more than happy to see Baumann landed in the soup, in trouble. And I can't really say more, but I just get the feeling from listening to people that I think I'm aware that investigations are still continuing. Wow. And if they shall we say, these investigations are not over the Baumann affair, but they could lead. They're involved in other athletics in Germany and problems over Berlin's Olympic bid as was. If they come out, then it could open a can of worms, and then the idea of someone plotting, the accusations were as old as Stasi, secret police from the GDR, who had fingered Baumann, as you say. Now, these are all allegations, but if the investigations continue, then something like that would not seem so strange.
Well, I mean, we'll await developments in due course. All I would say is I know some people whose word I would take, and they were absolutely adamant. I mean, as a cynic, you look at yet another excuse and spiked toothpaste, but there's some good people in the sport were adamant that Baumann was not a drug taker. Well, we'll await those developments in due course, Andy.
It's a wicked world, and
but the moral is, don't take a cup of water from a spectator in the course other than at the official drink stations. That's a bit basic, actually.
And don't let anybody get at your toothpaste.
No.
Either. 4 men, all from Africa. How often we said that? You can see the miles on the clock. They're into mile 19. Poetry in motion. The man in the middle, Rogers Rock. Then rider picture, Timothy Cheregat. Robert Chebaror is on the outside, and then just behind, the only man who's not wearing kind of grey or pastel shades is number 5, the world half marathon champion, winner in New York last autumn, Martin Lell.
Now they timed the start margin, the head start that they gave the elite women, so that it would be pretty much even when they came into the finishing straight. And at the moment, you would say that the winner of that duel between Enderhaber and Alemu is likely to perhaps be 2, possibly 3 minutes ahead of the first men. The men are just operating slightly outside their predicted schedule, the women operating slightly inside what we might have expected them to perform.
Men on course for what, sort of a 2:11, 2:12?
2:12, I think. Depends, of course. There's 30 kilometres. They don't deal in metrics so much in the USA. It's miles that they understand, but kilometres that most of these Africans will understand. But it depends really what kind of breakaways we get in the closing stages. It's always possible, in the way that we saw that Korean gentleman win 2 or 3 years ago, that somebody puts the hammer down and suddenly the splits become phenomenal, and they get back.
Yes.
Yeah, Lee Bong-ju get a much quicker finishing time.
I remember. It just shows that even Andy and Jeff could be wrong. I remember we were looking back at that commentary. I've forgotten actually who he was dueling with towards the finish. I think we were both saying Lee looks like he's tiring, etc.
He looked like he was on a kamikaze mission. His head had gone back.
And
his legs
blow me down. He won it.
Yeah, it just came alive, and it can happen. It can happen. It can happen in the right way. It can happen in the wrong way. You know, you can be on a steady rhythm and suddenly find something extra. You can be on a steady rhythm and suddenly hit the wall. It's just a cruel event, difficult course, and impossibly hot conditions. A reminder that approaching 30 degrees centigrade, that is 80 degrees Fahrenheit. 2 East Africans, and even they're not especially comfortable with what lies ahead here, but maybe after this what they face in Athens will be a relatively straightforward endeavour.
Enderhaber and Alemu, they'll have earned, well, whoever's the winner, the $80,000 prize money, $40,000 to runner-up. Perhaps welcome relief from that shower, though you wouldn't want any water in your shoes, would you?
No, I mean the danger, as we saw with a couple of dropouts in the Flora London Marathon yesterday, is that when there's water on the surface, that splashes up on the backs of your calves, backs of your hamstrings, and can cause cramp, and you lose your footing. You've been running on a very dry surface, and suddenly you go into Skid Pan Alley. So it's because those racing flats will be relatively smooth profiled on the outsole. So it's just a point to have your wits about you, really.
Still on the long stretch of Beacon Street in Brookline. Then they'll get into, well, as they approach 40 kilometres, just over 24 miles, the Boston Back Bay area, and then there really is the homeward stretch. Pretty much impassive from both of them. Hats off to Alemu. I mean, she's not looked intimidated at all. She's run her own race. She was prepared to go out early. Knew Enderhaber was behind her, but she's hung in there, and she hasn't just said, oh well, you're the world champion and that means I can't hack it. The developments in the men are just starting to string them out, and here's Timothy Cheregat, who's going away. Now the reports out of the Dieter Hogan training camp, Cheregat is one of his athletes for the German coach, was that they were all 3 of them, Kip Kemboy, Kiagora and Cheregat, were all running well. And we've got Robert Chebaror just trailing in second.
Look at that guy, miles off the curb, just crouched down in the roadway, right on the racing line. What's he like? Somebody needs to get them back. That's a right-hand turn with him crouched right on the blind point of the bend with his Nikon.
Well, we have seen some of the race officials. It's a modern fashion these days, a very good one, of having race officials on bikes, cycles, that is, bicycles. Just make sure that the runners aren't being tested. A sponge for Chebaror. Timothy Cheregat looking smooth and looking good. And making use of that downhill stretch as well, isn't he? Just going away, testing out Chebaror. You wonder if that gap is growing.
It looks to be growing. He has a very lavish arm action, doesn't he? Look how his left arm is facing palm upwards, very loose-wristed, much more across the body than we've seen with a lot of the other Kenyan runners in that lead group. Somebody, I think, will make a move relatively shortly here. I'm just trying to think which of them will be thinking, I've got a sprint finish. They've both got some reasonable track times, but I don't think either of them have ever had to use a sprint finish at the end of a marathon, have they? So I just wonder, as we whittle our way down into the final 10 or 15 minutes of this race, whether somebody might just start to panic about the need not to leave it too late.
Dereba and Alemu is building up to a fascinating finish in the women as well. They're coming in with, just over 3 miles or so to go. The world champion against the Ethiopian, and a look behind, and it's all down to them now. Dereba on the left and Alemu, where they've been for so long in this women's race. Well, now it's building up to the level of a track race, isn't it? Pretty soon there's going to be about 1,500 metres left. And as you've been saying, Jeff, who has got the better finishing speed? Dereba, her great marathons, she's been out in front and just streets ahead when she's been inside the 220 barrier.
Do you know what I'm thinking? And I don't want to put you on the spot on statistics here, but if the two Kenyans do manage to pull this off in both the men's and the women's race, will they hold all 4 men's and women's New York, London, Boston, Chicago titles? I think it's possible, isn't it?
I think it will be, because Lel won the men's division in New York last year, and I'm just going to scrabble back.
I've had to think through. I think I may be right. I think Kip Keino may be watching these pictures. He was in London yesterday, maybe catching up with exploits in Boston before he travels back, and I think that will absolutely delight him, because he was quite outspoken after the World Cross Country about the need for Kenya to restore its foremost reputation, and just thinking about that, I mean, it's not surprising that it's Kenya doing that, but it still needs the personnel to achieve those feats, and for all 8 Grand Slam berths to be occupied. It's like in tennis, if it was the same country having won all 8 Grand Slams, it's a formidable achievement, isn't it?
It is indeed. Then it's a question of whether they can do it in the championships, and these continuing rows that simmer and then burst into flame again over selection and kind of deselection or whatever. It's a tangled web. But Dereba, just now again, I get the sense that she's gearing herself up. But Alemu is looking very relaxed. You know, Dereba is very upright and relaxed, but sometimes her shoulders are a little bit tight, don't they? I mean, Alemu, if you didn't know what their PBs, their bests were, and their background, you'd say, well, both looking pretty good.
Well, except Dereba now, you can see her teeth, her mouth at the gape, she's gasping for oxygen, she's sweated up obviously because it's such a hot day, but just a little bit more discomfort, just a little bit more urgency. I would say at the moment, you're probably right, Andy, that just the body language suggests that it's Dereba that's hanging on and Alemu that's perhaps forcing the issue just slightly more. 2:11 is the lapse time, just coming up to 2:12, so they now have perhaps less than 15 minutes of running to go.
We're in the Back Bay area of Boston. It's a great day, a national holiday in the US of A, and especially in New England and Massachusetts. And Dereba and Alemu together, they're all set to be giving the Bostonians a great finish. It's cat and mouse, but I'm just not sure who the cat. Well, thinking back to London day before, I didn't know that Margaret Okeo, I have to admit, I learn something new every day, is nicknamed the cat. But it seemed to be, in looking at the news agency reports, but cat and mouse. But which is which here?
Didn't they give Konstantina Dieter a nickname, Pusher or something? It seemed like it was almost like American prize fighting. Everybody had to have a nickname. I would say Dereba for me is the Ice Maiden, really, because this is about as distressed as I've ever seen her, and yet they're operating at a great pace. Still hard to pick a winner out of these two, isn't it?
They are pushing. A mile and a bit to go, and you know, we've almost forgotten about the actual finishing pace or the schedule of the race, and they picked up some time, haven't they? They're going a pretty reasonable lick. It's not going to be anywhere near a course record that's held by the London champion Margaret Okeo, but Dereba and Alemu. Still no moving. They're tantalising us, and they're tantalising each other. I just wonder how long. I think, looking on past records, I think, well, it's going to be Dereba. She's got all that experience, and she is just. You get a sense that she's trying to force it a little.
Yeah. It's going to be a dramatic duel, this one, because they haven't succeeded in taking anything out of each other. It's almost as if they've been dropped down at mile 25 and told, right, race 2 miles to the finish, or race 1.25 miles to the finish. And this is the race we're watching right now. Stride for stride, they've always been within arm's length of each other. They've not deviated even on the drink stations, as we've seen in the men's race. It really has been a slug between these two. Not used to losing, either of them particularly are. They've got very good win records.
And Alemu, I just can't get over how smooth Alemu looks as well. So I thought Dereba on the left was making a little push. It's almost like sort of cycling or rowing, talking about making a push to beat your opposite number. If you're thinking of rowing to a boat alongside you and you're sort of killing off the rower and the opposite boat, then you move up a pace. And there Dereba, from that angle,
just squeezing, isn't she? Just edging.
Just a little more.
Well, Alemu's got time to adjust her crucifix meanwhile, so she's not under too much pressure.
I'm thinking back to the great finishes of Boston, and 22 years ago, men's race, Dick Beardsley, Alberto Salazar coming in as, well, he was the world record holder. He'd won New York the year before. He was the young, dominant new king of the marathon, sweeping all before him. And Beardsley had a prolific racing record, but coming through from that and drove Salazar all the way to the line, and in the end Salazar beat his fellow American, but I think Salazar was never quite the same again.
Well, he was a hospital job, wasn't he? One of my heroes, Salazar, but there were occasions in his racing career, I think the Falmouth 7, where he was packed in ice and issued with the last rites. He just got everything out of himself, and I think you're right. I remember the pictures of that Boston win, but he had to dig right down into his soul to get the win. Very deep competitive instincts, but he was in a real mess afterwards.
Dereba showing her competitive instincts, just driving ahead, and for the last 800 metres or so, it's been the world champion Kenya who's been out in front, just making the Ethiopian work and testing her and looking for signs of weakness. But so far Alemu has looked relaxed. I just wonder if that rhythm's driving up. I'm trying to look at the way both athletes, their arms are driving up, and if there's any slackening. But they don't both look pretty good. Meantime, in the men's race, Timothy Cherigat is away. Robert Chebarabor is that distant second. So Cherigat, who was second for a long time last year and then lost it as Robert Cheriot to 1, dropped back to 4th place. He's really making amends this year. Another push from Dereba. But Alemu responding.
This is terrific crowd enthusiasm, isn't it? I mean, you'd have to say that if you were struggling in a marathon, this is the sort of thing to get the juices flowing, isn't it? Crowds on either side, whooping and hollering, cheering, bellowing.
It's like running a marathon gauntlet, isn't it? They're coming through mile 25, been and gone, and Dereba, who's taking a drink? Only one of them. Now,
quite late in the day to be taking on water, isn't it? It suggests that he's not completely comfortable. In fact, I think she's realised she perhaps has given a little bit of her hand away there by taking the water. Didn't that happen to Ron Hill one time? Or there was somebody saw a drink cup in the road and decided the guy up ahead must be feeling worse than him because it was so close to the finish.
Yeah. And they're both taking water now. Both taking water now, but is that going to play on Dereba's mind? Is it going to be the feel? Well, I kind of...
I grabbed first. I blinked.
Exactly. Not many emotions that you can read on Alemu's face. Nor with Dereba either.
So 2:18 almost exactly at 25 miles, so we'd give them perhaps 6 minutes to do the final mile and 4 to 6 and a bit, so a good time but not a day for records obviously. but a day when somebody wants to go into an Olympic Games with a previous win under their belt, and somebody doesn't want to be going in having suffered a defeat 4 months before the Athens Olympics.
Very unexpected events. Deraeba already in the Kenyan team. Ethiopians are using Boston as one of the most significant trial races. From this performance, whatever happens with the outcome, I think Alemu has shown that she's a championship runner, this kind of run. But
it's just mentioned, Andy, the difference between prize money between first and second, because Boston really has a very, very steep step between first and second. I think it's deliberate, and I think it's to add spice to occasions like this. $80,000 for the winner, $40,000 for the runner-up. Double your money, you've got a mile to do it. $40,000, it is really a very steep drop to lose out in this race.
And it's make your mind up time as well. It's going to be a quarter mile to decide it, and Deraeba is making use of that downhill, going away from Alemu now. The Ethiopian, that angle tells us more. The Ethiopian, does she have an answer? Deraeba going away. Alemu, can she fight back? Can she use that little increase in the road? And Deraeba, this is eyeballs out. This is what it's all about, all those months and years of training.
Stitch behind.
Alemu, she's got trouble, and Deraeba, if she can hold it, she's going to win her third Boston Marathon.
Alemu, you've seen her arms drop, you've seen her clutch at her side, classic indication of stitch. The cadence has gone slightly, you can see she's almost collapsing inwards on that left foot, so the smoothness has turned into roughness in that running action, and I think Deraeba sensed it and has powered away.
Deraeba, the great Kenyan, putting the boot in. Alemu, what a wonderful race she's had for Ethiopia, but she's just got to hang on now, because Catherine Deraeba is going away. It's not quite over, but that looks too big a gap to make up, and Deraeba just got to hold it and really apply that dramatic pressure that came when Alemu weakened so critically. And this has been a real test. This is showing what championship racing is about. The world champion, she's in the Kenyan Olympic team for Athens, and this on a rugged course, very similar to the original, the great course of the true marathon, from Marathon to the ancient Olympic Stadium. This is Catherine Deraeba on course to get a hat-trick of Boston titles and show that she's in prime form for the Olympics as well.
Well, and subject to anything we can check on the stats, it also means that going into Athens, Kenya could well hold all of the Grand Slam marathon titles if we regard Boston, London, New York and Chicago as the big four of world marathon running. They could all be in Kenyan hands by the end of today.
Deraeba on Boylston Street for the finish in Boston 2004, and this has been a wonderful watching, a waiting game from the world champion from Kenya. It was Elfanesh Alemu of Ethiopia who went out early, but Deraeba was always there, controlling things from second place. Olivera Jevtic of Serbia and Montenegro was in third, but she dropped off the pace. And then from well before halfway, it was a duel from two runners from East Africa, Deraeba and Alemu. And now, just in the last 400 meters, Deraeba has seized upon the weakening of Alemu. And this is the straight. She can't celebrate just yet, but Catherine Deraeba has got victory in her sights. She's got to move over and a final corner before the victory line is in sight.
Well, look at that gap now. That's how cruel the marathon can be. That gap demonstrates how cruel the marathon can be. Just barely 3 or 4 minutes ago they were side by side, and now it's a huge, huge margin.
Deraeba, a look behind to check where Alemu is, and she's gone. She's hanging on for second place. That last rise on Boylston Street, and now it's the run into the finish. And this will be one of the most impressive wins for Catherine Deraeba. It's not a fastest by no means for the second fastest woman of all time, but this has shown her tactical nous, her ability to stick in there, control the race, survive, and then come through under pressure on a day with temperatures high, and a wonderful dress rehearsal for the Olympics as well. Deraeba, you can't really read much emotion from that face. I think we'll hear all about the emotions when she's crossed the line, but this will be a victory for her to savour. And just a little glances round, she knows she's got it. She's just got to keep driving for that line, and victory
Well, she was voted the world's #1 marathon runner of last year, surprisingly, when Paula Radcliffe ran that 2:15. But let's remember that she ran 3 marathons last year. 1 was a world title. She was runner-up in London and runner-up in New York. So she knows all about forcing the issue at the front of races. And I think we can look forward to a very, very exciting Olympic women's marathon, August the 22nd. On the classic course.
We can indeed. So much to look forward to on Eurosports Athletics through this year. And Kathryn Enderavor has set out her stall. This is the champion for Boston. Enderavor, the long hard road from Hopkinton all the way to the centre of Boston. She's got it now. She can look behind. Alemu isn't going to come back. There's no danger from the Ethiopian anymore. It's been a tough, tough contest all the way through to the line, and now Enderavor can relish those last few strides. Enderavor, a supreme road racing machine, and now the Boston, after victory in 2000, 2001, she's on top of the Boston throne once again. 2:24, just inside 2:24.30 for Enderavor, the world champion. She takes the women's title, and that shows how hard it was, even for Enderavor. That was a victory for the mind as well as the body.
Now they do need, as a matter of respect to Alemu, just to track back and show her finishing, because it looked like she was in some distress. It took a while for her to even realise which carriageway she should be in.
Well, all the attention on Enderavor. Can I get you something? I think she needs a lot of liquid and to recover. That's very obvious that her hat-trick of Boston wins has come at a big cost.
Now, Andy, I am just going to comment on this, because I do think it's wrong that they haven't shown Alemu finish there. I mean, it was a fight right to the last mile, and yet for some reason we have to watch Enderavor in distress after the line, and we don't get to see just in what kind of shape Alemu finished. Very poor.
Well, all being well, we do hope that Elfanish Alemu has crossed the line in second place. It looked on course for her after suffering that stitch, that she fell away and from the challenge of Enderavor. Enderavor in big problems. We had a glimpse there of the leader in the men's race. With just about 2 miles remaining there, Timothy Cheregat, 4th a year ago when he tried to go with the attack of the eventual winner Robert Chariot, and Timothy Cheregat is out in front in the men's race. Understandably, there's a lot of attention for Kathryn Enderavor after winning. Barely able to acknowledge the applause of the crowd.
I'm surprised they haven't brought water to her as a matter of course, actually. That's
bouncy, upright style, and Cheregat is now slackening from him. Just wondering, when we last were with the men's race, Robert Cherabor, his fellow Kenyan, was drifting away from the leader. Martin Lell, also from Kenya, it was Kenya 1-2-3, was going down the field in 3rd. And Cheregat, a man who, his first race, competitive race in Kenya, 25 kilometres, he finished high up and he ran it in tennis shoes. I think that is talent.
I was just about to make an analogy of it. He actually makes the shape of a ball with his fists as he runs, doesn't he? His wrists go around in circles. It's quite a flamboyant upper body action. But yes, I think he had very humble footwear when he made his debut into the sport. But he's moved on, and he's moved on to probably the biggest day of his life so far.
That distant figure, recognised from his size, Cherabor is quite a tall man, and that is Robert Cherabor, who's been more of a half marathon specialist actually. He ran just outside 2:11 in Amsterdam, which is a fast course in his only marathon to date. But this, with all respects to Amsterdam, is a higher plateau of running, a test of running. Not over yet, in the sense that if Cheregat did weaken, indeed he just slackened off the pace a year ago, because he was second behind Chariot, and then 2 men, Benjamin Kumutai, and then Martin Lell went past him. He was finished just outside the top 3.
They do say with Gebrselassie one of the reasons he didn't immediately take to the marathon is that he has this bouncy running action, spends a lot of time in the air, puts a lot of pressure on his calves. But at the moment, after everything that Heartbreak and the Newton Hills can throw at him, this guy is still bouncing.
Well, it's all over in the sense of the test of the marathon is over for De Ruyber. She certainly is not in a great way. It's a question when you're trying to recover, as Timothy Cheregat just goes through mile 24, the mark of mile 24, whether you need to be on a stretcher or whether you just want to walk just to get a little recovery into your legs.
I think she perhaps wanted to just be left to her own devices, and it seems a shame that a camera gets shoved right on her when there's a race going on behind her, but there we are. That's part of the tradition of this event. I don't agree with it, but winning isn't everything, and there is a race going on behind them.
Timothy Cheregat leading in the men's race. A glance behind to see where Robert Cherubor has got to. And I think he'll be heartened by that glance, because from our camera, Cherubor not quite in sight. We did have an earlier shot about a minute or so beforehand where you could still see Cherubor, but we are catching up with the finishers in the women's race. The Latvian record holder, Prokopčuka. Now, I have to say that we can't be confirming the finishing order in the women's race, because we presume that Alemu of Ethiopia finished second behind the winner, De Ruyber. But whether Prokopčuka is third, I wouldn't want to go out on a limb, because we don't know who else has finished, because we had our cameras on De Ruyber.
The distressed winner, yes.
Denisova, the runner-up 12 months ago from Russia, and this is also the Olympic trials for the Russians, so that's not to be overlooked. Certainly she's heading for a high finish behind Prokopčuka. Nuta Olaru, the Romanians, yet another country to have Olympic trials, not just the Africans who are doing that. Olaru, very solid runner. And on the clock, they're going to be coming in just inside the 2 hours 30, or around 2:30 mark, which is evidence of what a tough day it's been. Women who are capable of running in the mid or low 2:20s. But you're right, Jeff, about the bouncy star from Cheregat. He's kind of almost pogoing away, but a lot of strength and drive coming up from those calves to be doing that.
But imagine what's going through his mind. It's a trial situation. Clearly the Kenyan men's team has been picked, but I mean, if anybody fails to make it, a win in Boston looks pretty good. A big payday, $80,000 to the winner. It's just the sort of day you dream about, and I think when you're winning, some of the fatigues that you might otherwise be feeling if you were a bit further back down the road just melt away.
Course records set 10 years ago by another Kenyan, Cosmas Ndeti. And that was a great year for course records, because Uta Pipig then was broken by Margaret Akeo. But Pipig set what was then the women's course record. Gold medal has already been attached around some necks to De Ruyber, and she's, I think, yes, she has got the traditional laurel wreath of the Kenyan victor for the Kenyan anthem.
This seems a little bit too immediate. I'm not sure she's getting the most out of this award ceremony yet. A few more minutes wouldn't have hurt. But
we could well be hearing that Kenyan anthem for the second time. Timothy Cheregat is looking good to make it the double. Looks like he's just getting stronger. Certainly no slackening in his pace. And he's into the, when I say into the unknown, here's someone who, he's run Boston before, but he's not known what it's like to be a winner of a big race.
No,
and sometimes he's just free and they're so confident. And yeah. The Kenyans, it seems, so often live in with respect a kind of world of their own. They're in their training camps, they come, they're in hotels, they're either resting, lying down on the bed, or out training. They sometimes don't seem to be phased, as runners from some other cultures are, by pressures.
Yeah. This is, depending on what your lifestyle is in Kenya, this is retirement money he's heading towards here. I mean, that's part of the pluses and the minuses of African athletes coming to Europe and the States and winning big time. Does it remove the hunger? Does it keep the hunger there? Does it incentivize him for championships?
Yeah, well, the course record of Cosmas Ndeti will stand for another year, at least for the men, as it has done for the women's. Cheregat isn't going to threaten a 2:07, but it's showing what a tough day it is. He's not only taken on water, but he's taken what could well be his own drink of choice in that other hand. And here's
saying that Boston was spiritual. How did you find the spirit down the stretch?
Well, it was so good. In fact, I lack some word to express it because it was so good. It was so much uplifting me since I started the race to the finish, where I felt like, well, I'm getting exhausted, but I knew that God was there. He never gets weary, so he kept on lifting me up and renewing my strength.
Your third Boston. This must be very, very special in this heat with that great competitive run down the stretch.
Yes, it was very competitive, but I thank God for everything because it was because of his might that I was able to do it.
We'll let you go. Congratulations on your third Boston Marathon Championship. The great Catherine Dereba.
Catherine Dereba, the winner of Boston in the women's race. Timothy Cheruiyot on his way. Can he make it a Kenyan double in Boston 2004? Catherine Dereba, the world champion, has already taken the women's title, completing a hat-trick after her successes in 2000 and then the following year. She's triumphed again 3 years after that in tough conditions. Temperatures in the high 20s Fahrenheit. And everybody has suffered from the very moment, the first winner in Boston, Ernst van Dijk, taking the men's shares, saying the runners are going to suffer today.
Yeah.
And how true that has proven. Cheruiyot, though, the Kenyan Navy man, I think he might be getting some leave of absence in reward for this win if he holds himself together. The man who ran his first competitive race in tennis shoes. What talent there is in Kenya, and Cheruiyot has gone away. He's left his compatriot Robert Cherubor behind him. Martin Lell, the last we saw, the New York champion, was trailing in third place. And Cheruiyot, this is his day of days so far.
Well, he still looks full of running, doesn't he? He did all the hard work on the downslope away from the Newton Hills. He's not looking back too much. I think you can sense that you can just see top right-hand corner there. In fact, I think that's one of the Oriental women in the red on the left of shot. It may even be some of the elite women that he's caught. So the margin of victory is possibly getting on for a minute already.
Looking strong, busy arm action. I don't know if he needs to look behind him so much, because if there's anybody that close, he'd hear, even with the shrieking and cheers going on beside him. And he must get a sense also with the motorbike escort that they'd be sort of making a path if there was somebody in danger of catching him. He's really just got to press on. His personal best, well, 2:09.34. Look at his other wins. He's going to smash that personal best, and this is going to be a fine run, not just in body of victory, but also given the conditions in time to knock such a chunk prospectively off your personal best on such a tough day.
Well, it was an opportunity for him, wasn't it? And he's taken it. Very, very close now. I don't know how familiar he is with the finish layout, but just a couple of turns away now from the site of the finish podium. And I think he's going to be in rather better shape than Dereba. As for Alemu, we don't know.
It did seem that Alemu was slowed, as Jeff was pointing out, by a stitch in the last half mile or so of the race, when Dereba put in what proved to be her final attack, her final push. And Timothy Cheruiyot looking good. He's got to make one more turn. Can he beat his personal best? 2 hours, 9 minutes and 34 seconds, his fastest. He's had wins on his record. He's won in the likes of San Sebastian in Spain. But this, Boston, that's streets ahead of any other success he's had so far. Yet another strong man out of Kenya. And Cheruiyot looking so good. He may not break his personal best today. I don't think he will, because that's the final turn. And he's loping towards that finish. He knows he's in the clear. They say, the Kenyan alternatives, the substitutes for the Olympic Games. Well, Martin Lel is one of them. Cherigat's beaten him. Rogers Rop, the champion 2 years ago, he's also beaten Rop. But barring injury, the Kenyan selections are settled for Athens, but Cherigat, he's going to come home for a big payday. And he will be much in demand from race organisers all over the world. The Boston champion is always a man or woman who can just about name his own price.
Well, the world moves on, doesn't it? There was a time when 2:10 or better was absolute platinum in world marathon running, and now the win is important, but we look for times of 2:05, 2:06. So for Boston, it's been a tricky day. The weather hasn't helped, but I think we've had two very worthy winners, and now the Grand Slam of marathon titles are going to be in Kenyan hands as the countdown to Athens begins.
Men and women from the hills, from those Ngong Hills, Eldoret, from Marakwet, from Kapsabet, all over, training in those camps, so focused, such discipline. And Timothy Cherigat is the latest in the line. A year ago he tried to stay with the eventual winner Robert Chariot, but dropped off the pace in the Newton Hills. He was back in 4th place. He was considered certainly a top 3 hope, and how he's justified that hope. He's the champion of Boston 2004, Timothy Cherigat of Kenya, and it's a Kenyan double as Cherigat and Dereba triumph.
Nice job.
Nice job indeed, and that is an understatement on such tough conditions. This is a man for a strong course.
Water, please. Water. Yep. You have to select, please. Water. Thank you. There you go. Good.
He doesn't say much, does he? But he's done it all. Cherigat is the winner, and Robert Cherabor is coming home in 2nd place. And for someone who's coming to the race not as a marathon specialist, and it is a move up, isn't it, from half marathon and the shorter road races. We can look around the world and see people, even if they've run very respectable marathons, and you still can't call them marathon runners. But this, it's not just about the time. It's about proving yourself when the pressure's on. It's a big city race, all the media attention, and Cherabor coming home for 2nd place has certainly done that.
Yeah, this is a step up in class for him, and I think it will. Well, it looks like he's gone under the women's finish showing 2:40, so he's gone down the left-hand funnel instead of the right-hand funnel.
And Cherigat not feeling very well. I think he took on some of that energy drink, and then it's come back at him.
Yeah, I'm not sure the camera should be intruding at this point. Let's just concentrate on the race. I think they need to decide.
Yamamoto. No, in fact, Rika Tabashi. Yamamoto was another of the Japanese, but Rika Tabashi, 2:39 runner. Well, from one of the homes of the marathon, indeed, home, Fukuoka. Home indeed. That steady kind of pitter-patter finish for the Japanese. Tabashi would like to be able to say what her finishing time was. She's a couple of minutes outside her personal best, but as we haven't seen all the women finish, we certainly don't want to risk calling a place for Tabashi. The 3rd placer, definitely we can be sure of saying that, is Martin Lel. And Lel is going to repeat his 3rd spot on the podium of last year. Very solid run from Lel.
Now it'll be interesting to see what instructions he gets from the Kenyan Federation as to his status as a reserve for the Olympic marathon, because clearly a marathon preparation isn't one that you undertake lightly, and it's not one that you can switch to other marathons, especially when your scheduled date is in August. So does Lel prepare as if he might make a place on the team, or does he bide his time and see what offers come his way for the autumn?
Whatever the Kenyan Federation have in their minds, certainly Martin Lel has done just about all he could. A top 3 finish in Boston. And again, Martin Lel goes through under the women's finish. I think that can be excused, just thinking of seeing that finish line and head for it. But it's Kenyan 1, 2, 3, and there may be some more there too. And Timothy Cherigat celebrating. Now I have a hunch, but is Uta Pipik. And my hunch is right.
Yeah.
Uta Pipik, a champion here and course record holder 10 years ago from Germany. She divides her time between the States and Germany, and she was a long-time partner and now is business associate of the man who coaches Timothy Cheregat, and that's Dieter Hogan. So Cheregat, the champion of Boston, and Kiogora coming through in 4th place, the champions of Boston. Timothy Cheregat, the men's champion in Boston, and it's been a great triumph not only for the Kenyans and Dereba taking the women's race and Cheregat the men's, but also coaching Dieter Hogan, coaching Cheregat to victory, and it's been tough conditions. This is a race which will be talked about a long time. Not think about the times, Jeff, but it's been really special.
It's been some great racing. I'll be interested to see how Dereba recovers in time for Athens.
Very interesting indeed. From Andy Edwards and Jeff Whiteman and Boston. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thanks, Reggie.
Thank you, Paris.